November 30th, 1994. Tupac Shakur walked into Quad Recording Studios in New York City. He was there to record with Biggie Smalls, his friend, his brother, someone he trusted completely. Minutes later, Tupac was lying on the floor with 5 bullet wounds. He'd been shot, beaten, and robbed. His jewelry was gone. He thought he was going to die. When he stumbled upstairs to the recording studio, Biggie and Sean Puffy Combs were there. They saw what happened to him, but according to Tupac, they didn't seem surprised. They didn't seem shocked. They just looked at him. That moment changed everything. The friendship died that night, and 3 years later, both Tupac and Biggie would be dead. This is the story of how one shooting destroyed the closest friendship in hip-hop and started a war that killed 2 legends. To understand what happened, you need to know where they started. Tupac and Biggie met in 1993. Tupac was already famous. He'd been in movies, he had hit albums, he was one of the biggest names in rap. Biggie was just starting out. He'd done a freestyle in a magazine called The Source. Tupac heard it and was impressed. When Tupac came to New York, he asked to meet Biggie. They connected immediately. Tupac saw potential in Biggie. He gave him advice about the music industry. He told him what deals to avoid. He told him how to protect himself from bad contracts. Biggie looked up to Tupac. In interviews from 1993 and 1994, Biggie called Tupac his idol. He said Tupac taught him how to be a real artist. He said Tupac showed him it was possible to be commercially successful and still be respected. They hung out constantly when Tupac was in New York. They smoked together, they partied together, they talked about making music together. There are photos of them from this time. They're smiling. They look like brothers. That's what everyone called them, brothers. Tupac even let Biggie open for him on tour in 1993. This was huge. Biggie didn't have an album out yet. Most of America had never heard of him, but Tupac put him on stage in front of thousands of people every night. This friendship was real. Everyone who was around him said so. They trusted each other completely. Then came November 30th, 1994.
Tupac was in New York working on music. A rapper named Lil Sean called him and said he'd pay Tupac $7,000 to appear on the track. The recording session was at Quad Studios in Times Square. Tupac showed up around midnight with 3 friends. When they walked into the lobby, 3 men in army fatigues was there. Tupac thought they looked suspicious, but he kept walking toward the elevator. That's when they pulled out guns. They told Tupac to get on the ground. They told him to give him his jewelry. Tupac refused. One of the men hit him in the head with a gun. Then they started shooting. Tupac got shot 5 times. He got hit in the head, the leg, and the groin. One bullet went through his hand when he tried to protect himself. The shooters took his jewelry, over $40,000 worth of chains and rings. The men ran out. Tupac dragged himself into the elevator. He pressed the button for the studio floor. He was bleeding everywhere. He thought he was dying. When the elevator doors opened, Tupac stumbled into the studio. Biggie was there. Puffy was there. Andre Harrell, the head of Uptown Records, was there. Lil Sean was there. Here's what Tupac said happened. Nobody rushed to help him. Nobody seemed shocked. They just stared at him. Tupac later said in interviews that Biggie and Puffy looked guilty. He said they didn't act like friends who just saw their boy get shot. They acted like people who knew it was gonna happen. The police came, the ambulance came, Tupac went to the hospital. He survived, but barely. Doctors said he was lucky to be alive. While Tupac was in the hospital recovering, he had time to think. And the more he thought about it, the more suspicious the whole thing seemed. Tupac asked himself questions. Why was he set up to come to that studio? Who knew he would be there? Who had something to gain from him getting hurt? He thought about the fact that Biggie and Puffy was upstairs. He thought about how they reacted when they saw him. He thought about the timing. Tupac also knew about the tension between East Coast and West Coast rap. He was signed to Death Row Records, which was based in Los Angeles. Biggie was signed to Bad Boy Records in New York. The two labels were becoming rivals. There was money involved. Death Row was making millions. Bad Boy wanted that same success. Tupac started thinking that maybe someone wanted him out of the way. Then something else happened that made Tupac even more suspicious. The day after he got shot, while he was still in the hospital, Tupac got convicted in a separate sexual assault case. He had been on trial for months. The jury found him guilty. Tupac had to go straight from the hospital to jail. He couldn't recover. He couldn't investigate what happened. He was locked up. While Tupac was in prison, Biggie's album, Ready to Die, blew up. It went multi-platinum. Biggie became a superstar. Bad Boy Records became one of the biggest labels in hip-hop. Tupac watched all of this from prison. He saw Biggie get rich and famous while he was locked in a cell. He saw Puffy on TV talking about how successful Bad Boy was becoming. To Tupac, it looked like they set him up so they could take his spot. Tupac spent 8 months in prison. Suge Knight, the head of Death Row Records, paid $1.4 million to bail him out in October 1995. The deal was that Tupac had to sign to Death Row and release 3 albums for them. Tupac agreed. He needed to get out. He needed to tell his side of the story. The first thing Tupac did was go after Biggie and Puffy. In interviews, Tupac said Biggie and Puffy knew about the shooting before it happened. He said they set him up. He said they were fake friends who betrayed him for money and fame. Biggie denied it. He said he had nothing to do with the shooting. He said he was just as shocked as everyone else. He said he loved Tupac like a brother and would never hurt him. But Tupac didn't believe him, and he wasn't gonna let it go. In 1996, Tupac released Hit 'Em Up, one of the most aggressive diss tracks ever made. He went out to Biggie, Puffy, Bad Boy Records, and everyone associated with them. In the song, Tupac claimed he had slept with Biggie's wife, Faith Evans. He called Biggie fat. He said Biggie was a fake gangster. He said Bad Boy was full of weak rappers who couldn't survive on the West Coast. But the most serious part was when Tupac threatened violence. He said he was ready for war. He said if anyone from Bad Boy came to California, something bad would happen. This wasn't just rap beef anymore. This was personal. This was dangerous.
The beef between Tupac and Biggie became bigger than just two rappers. It turned into East Coast versus West Coast. Death Row had Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, and other major West Coast artists. Bad Boy had Biggie, Puffy, and major East Coast talent. Both labels had money. Both had power. Both had people willing to fight. Fans picked sides. If you were from New York, you supported Biggie. If you were from LA, you supported Tupac. Radio stations on each coast refused to play music from the other side. At concerts and award shows, tensions were high. Death Row artists and Bad Boy artists couldn't be in the same room. Security had to keep them separated. There were confrontations. At the 1995 Source Awards in New York, Suge Knight took shots at Puffy on stage. He said Death Row was the real power in hip-hop. The crowd went crazy. People thought a riot was going to break out. Tupac kept making songs about Biggie. Biggie responded with his own disses, though he was less direct. He made songs like Who Shot Ya?, which came out right after Tupac got shot. Tupac took it as disrespect. Biggie said the song was recorded before the shooting and wasn't about Tupac at all. Nobody believed him. The media made it worse. Magazines ran stories about the beef. They printed every insult. They highlighted every threat. They treated it like entertainment. But people close to both rappers were scared. They saw where this was heading. They knew someone was going to get hurt. On March 9th, 1997, Biggie was in Los Angeles for the Soul Train Music Awards. He was promoting his new album, Life After Death. After a party that night, Biggie left in a GMC Suburban. His car stopped at a red light on Wilshire Boulevard. A car pulled up next to him. Someone rolled down the window and fired multiple shots. Biggie was hit 4 times. The car drove off. Biggie died less than an hour later at the hospital. He was 24 years old. Nobody was ever arrested for his murder. The case is still unsolved today. Many people believe Biggie's death was retaliation for Tupac's death. Others thought it was connected to the East Coast versus West Coast war. Some thought Suge Knight or people connected to Death Row were involved. The police investigated for years. They looked at gang connections. They looked at record label executives. They looked at everyone who had a motive. But they never found enough evidence to charge anyone. What really happened at Quad Studios? Years later, the truth about the Quad Studios shooting started coming out. In 2008, an article in the Los Angeles Times revealed that the FBI had identified the shooters. According to federal documents, the shooting was orchestrated by Jacques Haitian Jack and James Jimmy Henchman Rosemond, 2 men who had connections in the music industry. The documents showed that Tupac was shot because of a dispute over money and respect. It had nothing to do with Biggie or Puffy. They weren't involved. They didn't know it was gonna happen. Dexter Isaac, one of the men who was there that night, gave a statement in 2011. He said Jimmy Henchman paid him and 2 others to rob and shoot Tupac. He said Biggie had nothing to do with it. James Rosemond was eventually convicted in 2012 for running a drug trafficking organization. He's currently serving life in prison. In court documents related to that case, prosecutors confirmed he was connected to the Tupac shooting. So Tupac was wrong. His best friend didn't betray him. Biggie didn't set him up. It was people Tupac had beef with for completely different reasons. But by the time the truth came out, it was too late. Both Tupac and Biggie were already dead.
November 30th, 1994. That was the night everything changed. Tupac got shot. He survived, but the friendship didn't. Tupac spent the last 2 years of his life believing his best friend betrayed him. He made songs about it. He threatened violence. He helped start a war between 2 coasts. Biggie spent those same 2 years trying to convince people he was innocent. He watched his friend turn into his enemy. He watched a lie destroy everything they'd built together. Then Tupac died on September 13th, 1996. 6 months later, Biggie died too. 2 of the greatest rappers ever. Both killed before they turned 26. Both killed because of a beef that started with a misunderstanding. The shooting at Quad Studios didn't just end a friendship. It changed hip-hop forever. It showed how quickly things could turn violent. It showed how rumors and paranoia could destroy lives. And it taught everyone a lesson. The truth matters, because once you believe a lie, it can kill you.